Next function is the array filter. So in a search, let's type array underscore filter and hit enter. And what it does, it filters elements of an array using the callback function. Again, we are using the callback function inside of this array filter. It returns the array, as you can see. It takes the array as the first argument, and then, because we have square brackets here, which indicate these arguments are optional, the second argument might be the callback function, and the third one, the flag. Iterates over each value in the array, passing them to the callback function. If the callback function returns true, the current value from array is returned into the result array. Array keys are preserved. So that means that if we have, for instance, string indexes or keys, basically, they will be preserved. Same with the numerical ones, obviously. So we don't have to be worried about whether they're going to be reset or not, because we're going to get them in exactly the same way. So then parameters. Array, obviously the array which we want to iterate over. Then we have this callback, optional callback function. If no callback is supplied, because it's optional obviously, all entries of array equal to false will be removed. And we know roughly what basically value, what data type casts to what boolean, false or true. And then we have a flag determining what arguments are sent to callback. So basically the first one, pass key as the only argument to callback instead of a value. So rather than the values of the arrays, we're going to be passing keys into this callback function. And the other one, which is array filter, use both, pass both value and key as arguments to callback instead of the value. Have a look at this. It's value and key, which means first argument which will be value, second will be key. And then we have return values, returns the filtered array. And then changelog tells us that the flag parameter and constants array filter use key and array filter use both have been added to the PHP version starting from 5.6. So if you are running a lower version than 5.6, you won't be able to use this third argument. So let's go back to our editor. I have removed everything from the previous exercise, and we are going to start with a students array. Students equals, and I'm going to use square brackets this time for the array. And I'm going to use multidimensional array of arrays. So the first item will be array, obviously, age equals 16, and the name will be Jane. The next item will be, again, array, age, this time will equal, say, 20, and name will be John. And the last item I'm going to be using here, age, will be 31, and name will be Jennifer. Let's stick to this J-based names for this exercise. Okay, now we are going to create the variable allowed to enter equals, and then array underscore filter, and the first argument of semicolon after the call to this function's first argument is our array which we want to filter, so students, and the second one is a callback function, so function and only one argument, student, then set of curly brackets, and inside of this function we need to return either true or false. So what we are going to do is return, and what we're going to, we can use brackets or not, I'm going to use brackets, student, and I'm going to use its age if it's more or equal 18. If it's more or equal to 18, then it's going to return true. Otherwise, it's going to return false. As you can see inside of these brackets, I'm using a space. As you may remember, PHP doesn't really care much about spaces, so that's fine. Just to make sure that it looks a little bit clear here. Okay, so what do you think we should get in return? Obviously, student is one of these arrays. When it iterates, obviously it goes one by one, obviously passing this whole array. So we get in the student, and then we get in the index age, which will return us either 16, 20, or 31. And based on this result, we are getting true or false, basically, because obviously we're comparing here the value associated with this age against the 18. So basically the records which we should get back are these with John and Jennifer. Jane obviously is 16, is less than 18, so that will return false, which means it will be excluded from the return value. Okay, let's just test it. So echo pre-tags just to format it a little bit nicer, and print R for our array, allowed to enter array as argument, and echo closing pre-tag so that we can see everything nice and clear in the browser. So let's go back to our browser, our page, refresh the page, and there we go. Fair enough, 16 is not included. So Jane obviously has been excluded from this array. So we've got our first and a second array. There we go. Age and name, obviously everything works fine. Obviously we're starting from the index 1 because obviously index 0 was our Jane record. If we scroll up, this is index 0 obviously. By default it's 0. This one will be 1 and 2. As you can see, keys have been preserved. Now this is one of the way of doing this. If we are running version 5.6 of PHP or higher, which I do, you do it in a slightly different way. If age and name is the only thing that we have here, we can slightly change our array and just use age as the key and the name as the value of the array, in which case our array is going to be a little bit tidy here. So you only have age as key and name as the value. So what we need to do now is, as the third argument, I'm going to use this array underscore filter underscore use, no user, use both. And rather than doing it this way, now we obviously are passing keys and values, values and keys rather, because obviously we pass this third argument which tells us use both keys and values. And as you may remember, I pointed out it's values and keys. So first thing, we will get value, which will be name. I'm going to represent it with the variable called name, and the next one will be age. We're not going to be using name, but it has to be passed through because it's an argument request, basically, which is going to be passed to this callback function anyway. So now, rather than using this as an array, because obviously we are not using arrays of arrays here, we are using simple associative array with the key and value only, string value. So what we need to do now is use this age variable, age, which is the argument, and we compare it the same way as we did before, because obviously age is going to be just this index of this array, and then name would be obviously the first argument of this callback function. So now we're comparing this, and we should get exactly the same result, except for the fact that obviously the representation will be different because now our arrays look as basically in a different way. We don't have arrays of arrays, as I've explained already. Obviously, we only have keys and values. So that, fair enough, Jane is obviously excluded from this one as well. Let's now try and do last one example when we are actually not passing the second argument and not passing the third one either. So now, without the callback function, we should get all of these results because none of them will will basically cast to Boolean false. But if we go back and if I remove the name from the first one, as you may remember, empty string evaluates to Boolean false, in which case, obviously, again, Jane, which isn't Jane now because we've removed the name, has been removed. If we try the same with, say, numerical value, if I put 0 for replace John with just 0 for the value, and if we go back to the browser, then John obviously will be removed, and we only have 60 and 31, Jane and Jennifer. So that's how it works without the callback function. It basically checks the value associated with the item in the array, and if it evaluates to false, basically if it casts to false, then it's going to be excluded from the resulting array.